Today we are in Chiweshe. We are here to do crop inspection for a crop which was affected by dumping off.
Okay, the other thing that I wanted to keep on emphasizing is that size is not ability. Ability is not in the size of the land, it is in utilization of the land.
Vamwe wenyu makakura muchiudzwa kunzi musapatapiwa mbesa akasimadzi bude. Kana kuti mai Georgina vakauya vakatransplant madomasi angu anofa. That's dumping off. All crops are affected by dumping off. Dumping off is experienced in tomatoes. You can get it in cabbages. You can get it in brassicas. You can get it in onions and a whole list of plants. I work with farmers every day, and we had a case where a farmer experienced dumping off. He bought his seedlings from a nursery and then he transplanted into his greenhouse. And then after about a week or two, his seedlings had dumping off. And he went around, he didn't know what was happening until he sent me a picture, and as we are speaking, he's now harvesting his tomatoes.
The horticulture business that we do, we actually started it 2.5 years ago during this time of COVID or during the time of lockdown. We don't grow only tomatoes, we do crop rotation. Because the same place that we are growing tomatoes, what we are saying is this time you put some tomatoes, then the next time you need also to put a different crop. But well, a tomato, we've discovered that it is a crop that you can grow throughout the season. It has got its advantages. And the biggest advantage of a tomato is that it's needed every day. It's like buying bread every day. You can't do without bread. You can't do without salt. So it's something that is needed every day. So we said, no, look, let's make it our main crop that we have to grow almost like every season.
If we look in this case, the farmer transplanted his seedlings, and then after 1 to 2 weeks, they started wilting and dying. If you look at the symptoms, the stems were sunken just around the stem base, right? And he had no idea what it is until he came through to the office with his sample, and then we identified that is dumping off, and then that's when we gave him a fungicide to use, right? For those who are into nurseries, you might plant your seed and then it does not emerge. Chances are very high that it will be dumping off, or it can emerge, grow, and then after about a week or 2 weeks it just dies off. And generally you look for symptoms like water lesions around the stem base, you know, where the seedling is sunken around the stem base. Normally that's dumping off, and immediately once you come across such kind of symptoms, you have to apply fungicides which are specific to dumping off.
We were expecting the quality product or quality fruits from the greenhouse right from the onset, but well, it was actually a learning curve. So the first challenge that we faced was that this was our first crop, the tomato, and soon after buying it from the suppliers who supplies seedlings, we're expecting it to be a good, to give us good results in the first week based on the experience that we've had from growing from the open field. But then unfortunately, our tomato started wilting. It was not healthy as we expected it. Soon after buying it, that was in the first week. Then I was actually surprised, and it was so painful.
Dumping off exists in 2 states. We've got a pre-emergence dumping off and then a post-emergence dumping off. For pre-emergence dumping off, this is when we sow our seed and then it fails to emerge. We call it pre-emergence dumping off. And then at times the seed will germinate and then it just dies off. That's pre-emergence dumping off. On post-emergence dumping off, this is when we transplant our seedling and then it ends up having water-soaked lesions around its stem base. This is after 1 to 2 weeks after transplanting. That's what we call post-emergence dumping off. When we say post-emergence dumping off, this is dumping off which actually comes after the seed is actually fully germinated, is actually in its growth stages, and then it's attacked by dumping off.
Knowledge is very, very powerful. That's why it's expensive well to gain or to get. I was devastated to a point that I wanted to remove all the tomatoes and start afresh, which means I was going to lose that $100 that I had invested initially. Maybe I was going to, in terms of time again, I was going to lose. But it is because you don't have the knowledge of how certain problems can be overcome. So because of the team that came to elect the greenhouse, they were very supportive. In actual sense, they are very supportive even up until now. That the guys who said, no, don't remove the tomatoes, just make sure that we work on the situation and we salvage it, and we make sure that we solve the problem. So it is because they have got knowledge. They deal with different farmers. They deal with different situations, and some of the situations that you might face, they could have faced it elsewhere. So they were just saying, no, look here, there's also another farmer from, I think they talked about another farmer from Bulawayo, who also had a similar situation like the situation that we had. Then said, no, look here, but that situation was solved, and the tomatoes, they survived.
Imagine after putting your money in 1 hectare of tomatoes, you buy your seedlings from a nursery, and then dumping off comes, right? First, you're going to lose time in diagnosing the disease, and then secondly, you don't even know which fungicide you're going to lose. Already, you're going to lose your investment. You have invested close to 4,500 or 5,000 USD for that 1 hectare of tomato, and then because of dumping off, you're also going to lose part of the money.
All right, so we are actually advised to get in touch with the CITCHEM, and from CITCHEM I got in touch with a lady which is called Sithembile, and I told her about the problem of my tomato, which was actually wilting, and she advised me to give the samples. I sent the samples through the pictures on WhatsApp. Immediately when she saw the problem, then she said, no, this problem is that wilting is called dumping off. That was my first time to hear about dumping off. But still I was not very much convinced, because I was saying that this is immediately coming from the supplier who supplied me the seedlings. But then she insisted that no, the problem can be salvaged, the problem can be resolved. After about 7 to 10 days, we started seeing some changes. The manager who manages my plot phoned me and said, no, look here, boss, you can't, what I'm seeing here, you can't believe it. The tomatoes, they are really changing. They started having life. Boss, they were actually like sort of like drying. The stem was getting thinner and thinner. Then after 2-3 days, some of them, they would actually collapse. But immediately after applying proper N72, the tomato seedlings, they started gaining life, and we're happy now. The tomatoes, from then, they've actually changed. They've actually improved a lot. I even called the guys who erected the greenhouse, and when they came to see the tomatoes, after they'd seen them before we applied that proper N72, they were actually shocked. They were actually happy. They said, no, this is wonderful. This is great. The chemical that we used, it really worked. It really worked onto the tomatoes. And even now, the tomatoes, they changed, and they are doing well in the market. And the tomato itself is actually beautiful. It's quite a good tomato. It's a good fruit.
Dumping off is a disease which is caused by 3 pathogens. There is Phytophthora, Pythium, Rhizoctonia. Let's look at the life cycle of a tomato plant. There are 3 stages at which the plant is exposed to dumping off. The first exposure at seed level, the second exposure at the growing material which you're going to use, and the third exposure is in the field. Let me repeat this again. The first exposure, the seed which we're going to use. The second exposure is the growing media which we're going to use in the nurseries, and the third exposure is in the field. Let's talk about how we manage dumping off at seed level. Farmers, you are supposed to use certified seed from seed houses. And why we encourage you to use certified seed is because certified seed is treated against these diseases. The moment you use diseased seeds, which means you are transferring dumping off into your field. Farmers, you should spend money to make more money. Buy certified seeds, do not buy diseases. Dumping off can come from your seed if the seed is not properly treated. It can come from the growing media where you are going to buy your seedlings from. The most popular growing media which is available on the market is horse manure. Horse manure, they normally use it either in their nursery beds or they can put it in their float trays. This is how we are going to treat horse manure against dumping off. Firstly, you have to solarize your horse manure. What you are going to do is that you're going to heap it into a compost-like, and then you're going to cover with a black plastic for almost 2 months. The reason why we solarize is because we want to kill all the pathogens. If there are any weed seeds which are available, they are going to be destroyed. And then after that, after the solarization, the horse manure has to be treated with a chemical called propan N72 to make sure that there are no more pathogens before we put it in the float trays or before we put it in the nursery beds. The third exposure of dumping off, which is in the field, this is when we are transplanting the seedling into the field or we do a direct seeding into the field. When we do a direct seeding into the field, this is when the seedling fails to germinate. And then if it is transplanting, this is when you transplant your seedling, maybe 1 week or after 2 weeks, this is when you get water-soaked lesions around the base. Right. Once you identify the symptoms of water-soaked lesions around the base, this is when we apply proper N72, which is a chemical for dumping off. We also have Captain 50 SC, which is also a chemical treatment for dumping off. And then we can also drench with azoxystrobin. Remember, this is a curative because we've identified the symptom. But on the day of transplanting, as a preventative, you are supposed to drench your seedling on the day of transplant with proper N72 or Captain 50 SC for dumping off. Other than chemical treatment, there are also cultural methods which we have to practice to make sure that we keep away from dumping off. First and foremost, make sure that if you are planting in the rainy season, particularly for tomatoes, you have to make sure that you plant on raised beds. When we plant on raised beds, then that means all the water is going to drain off. Secondly, we are not supposed to over-irrigate. This also causes dumping off. There are chemicals which manage dumping off. 1, we have got proper N72, proper mocha hydrochloride. This is a chemical which is specific for dumping off. How you apply the chemical? Either you are going to drench in the field or you are going to apply it as a foliar spray. For those who have got nurseries, you are going to put your proper N72 into the watering can, and then you are going to irrigate your seedlings. And then for those who will be dealing with seeds, then that means you need to treat your seed. How do we manage dumping off? Dumping off is not a very difficult disease to manage. Number 1, we should not over-irrigate our crops. Once you over-irrigate your crops, that's when you get dumping off, particularly after transplanting. Number 2, for those who do their nurseries, particularly Pasi, Kanamumavu, you are supposed to rotate your nurseries. One time ukata nursery on that block, you have to put it on another block. For those who are in the nursery business, you should make sure that your growing media is treated. There are chemicals which are available which you can use to treat your growing media. Right. Fourthly, don't grow crops in waterlogged areas. Waterlogged areas attract dumping off. And then fifthly, we are going to talk about the chemical management for dumping off. Chemical management of dumping off, we have in the basket proper N72. This is a special type of chemical which is used to treat dumping off. So you can treat dumping off or you can even apply the chemical as a preventative to dumping off. When you know that you're going to transplant your tomatoes or your cabbages or your onion, on the day of transplanting, you're going to apply your chemical for dumping off. If you haven't applied the chemical and then you notice that your seedlings are having dumping off symptoms, then you can put in proper N72, and then you can also put Captain 50 SC. These are just some of the chemicals which are used to treat dumping off.
So, Billy, dumping off, it's a deadly disease, and the damage itself, it can cost one quite a lot. What I'm trying to say is, I'd invested a lot into the greenhouse. When I'm talking about the cost of the greenhouse, the transport, the chemicals that we apply to the tomatoes, the labor, in a nutshell, we can put that at around 4,000. So what it simply means is that with the crop, that I'd put into the greenhouse, if it was going to die because of that dumping off, I was going to lose 4,000 just like that within a week or within 2 weeks. It was going to be lost. I would have lost 4,000. Whereas that 4,000 that I had invested in the greenhouse, it was supposed to multiply in 2-3 seasons. I was supposed to get, I'm expecting in actual sense to get 12,000, which is actually a good return. After investing 4,000, then I get about 12,000 in 3 seasons, which is in about a year and a half. That's a good investment, but I was going to lose that in about a week or 2 weeks. So that was going to be very good, damaging, so devastating. But I want to thank proper and the manufacturers of proper and the suppliers, which CITCHEM, who managed to salvage the situation, so that at the end of the day, I'm now a smiling man, a farmer from my plot. So the damage was going to be very bad. It was going to be, I don't know if I was going to recover with the first crop. Having lost in the first crop, of course, I was going to do another crop again, but obviously maybe I was going to lose half of what I was expecting to generate from that greenhouse.
Dumping off, it's a disease which is caused by 3 pathogens. We have Rhizoctonia solani, we've got Pythium species, and then we also have got Phytophthora. So when you are attacked with dumping off, when you're making the choice of chemicals to make, you also need to know which dumping off am I experiencing. Do I have Rhizoctonia? Do I have Pythium? Do I have Phytophthora? Or maybe you might be having Pythium and Phytophthora. You might be having Pythium and Rhizoctonia. In the chemical basket for dumping off, we have Captain 50 SC. Captain 50 SC is a broad spectrum fungicide which also does rusts, it does botrytis, but it also does dumping off in nurseries and also in the fields. Captain 50 SC will only treat dumping off caused by the Phytophthora and Pythium species. Secondly, we also have got Azoxystrobin 25 SC. Azoxystrobin is also a broad spectrum fungicide which also does early blight, it does late blight, but it also does dumping off in the fields. But the special thing about Azoxystrobin, it also does Rhizoctonia, Pythium and Phytophthora. The third chemical for dumping off, we've got proper N72, which is proper mocha hydrochloride. This one is also a broad spectrum fungicide which you can use for treating downy mildew, but for nurseries and also in the fields, it treats Pythium and Phytophthora. The beauty about proper N72, you can actually use it as a curative for dumping off. You can use it also as a preventative treatment for dumping off. Last but not least, we also have got Toclophos 50 WP, which is also used to treat for dumping off in the field. You can use it as a preventative spray or as a curative spray, and then it does Phytophthora and Pythium. Besides dumping off the chemicals which we've mentioned, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are specific to dumping off. It doesn't mean that buying a bottle of Captain or buying a bottle of Azoxystrobin is just going to be confined to dumping off. These chemicals, you can also use them for other crop diseases which you'll be experiencing. Let's take example for Azoxystrobin 25 SC. Azoxystrobin 25SC is a strobilin. It's a broad spectrum fungicide which does a whole range of pathogens, from late blight to early blight to downy mildew. It will also do your leaf rusts. It will also do your leaf spots. So you can actually see that when you purchase Azoxystrobin 25SC, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to use it for treating damping off. You're also going to use it in your potatoes. You're going to use it in your peas. You're going to use it in your tomatoes. You're going to use it in your cabbages and even brassicas. When you purchase Captain 50SC, apart from treating damping off, Captain is also a seed dresser on its own. So which means if you are planning to grow your own seeds from Mudura, you can actually treat your own seeds using Captain. And besides you being a seed dresser and also treating damping off, Captain can also treat black spots. It can also treat a whole range of broad spectrum diseases in peas, in potatoes, in tomatoes, just to mention a few. Apart from treating damping off, this is for proper N72, which is proper mocarb hydrochloride. It doesn't necessarily mean that having proper mocarb hydrochloride in your chemical store is only for damping off. You can use your proper N72 for treating root rots. I think most of you, during this rainy season, if you're growing tomatoes, you experience root rots. This is when the tomato have got the roots all rotten, which means you have to drench your tomatoes with proper N72. Proper N72 is also for treating root rots in avocados. I think most of you have noticed kuti your avocado tree pamusha just dries up. This chemical is used for treating root rots, and then you can also use to treat it for downy mildew. Last but not least, for the chemicals which are used for treating damping off, we spoke about Toclophos 50 WP. Toclophos 50 WP apparently is only for treating damping off.
So Billy, let me hasten to say that we are not at a farm. We are not at a farm. This is not a farm. This is a rural home. I actually grew up in this area. It's actually pure rural, but we are converting that rural home into a plot. We're putting electricity, we've put the bore and everything else. We are converting this into a modern setup. I want to advise the farmers that farming is actually a business. You need to hire the rightful people to manage your farming, no matter at whatever scale that you're doing it. We started small, but with that small thing that you do, you need to realize the profits from it. You need to realize a living from it. Also, you need to build a network of other farmers. You need to build a network of other people who are into the same business that you are doing, if it is horticulture, that are also into horticulture, so that you share knowledge. Because you see what happens with farming is that there is a disease that might attack your crop, which has affected another farmer, and the moment you are in sync, the moment you are in touch, we share knowledge. Said, no, look here, it affected me, and this is how I resolved the situation. You need to spend your time onto the farm. You need to spend your time with the farmers so that you understand also their problems. You need also to spend your time in the field to be checking on your crops whether they are healthy or not. You need to develop a relationship with your crops or with your farm, a relationship whereby you know that at this time I'm supposed to be at the farm, and if you are supposed to be at the farm, you have to be there. The crops, your crops, they are waiting for you. They want you to see them so that you can act on them if there's a problem. Because it's like you've got a relationship. They give you money, and you are supposed to also invest into them. So where you invest into something, there should be a return. So you cannot expect a return into something that you are not spending your time with, into something that you are not also putting your attention or effort onto it. So that is my advice to the farmers.
Right, this is the end of our episode today. We were talking about damping off in tomatoes. Please note that it's not confined to tomatoes. You can get damping off in onions, in cabbages, in brassicas. So please, if you're experiencing those problems, or you intend to start any onion, cabbage or tomato project, please feel free to get in touch with us.